today we're going to be discussing how we as the church can bridge the gap between the older and the younger generations. Today we're joined by Sister Dion from Beulah Apostolic Church, Sister Kay from Beulah Apostolic Church, Pastor Joseph from Restoration Revival Fellowship. And so I just want you guys to introduce yourselves, tell us about your background, how you came to know God and what your history is with church. Dion.
Okay, my name's Dion. I've been baptized for about 12 years, I think. Yeah, 12 years. I grew up going to church, been to Seventh-day Adventist, been to Baptist church, etc, etc. Grew up in Jamaica, left, came here, lived with my mum, and she wasn't a Christian, so I started going to church with one of her friends, and actually that friend did something really bad. My mum told me, oh, you can't go to that church anymore. Actually, she goes, there's loads of old people in that church. And I was so upset because I really liked going to church. And the lady, we were all in her house the Sunday, and she flew downstairs and she was like, me hear you say you tell your daughter say she can't come to the church because I hear old people in the church. And my mom gave me some licks when I got home that Sunday. You take business that we say in the house and you take it. I wasn't trying to say the business. I was just trying to say, help me. I want to still come to church. Please don't let my mom take me away from church. And that was the attitude. To say the least, I got vexed. I just said bomb you people, and I just did my thing. I got pregnant around, I was about 16. And then just did my thing up until I was about in my 20s. Then started going to church with a friend, and the rest is history.
Right, okay.
I was born in church, meaning that my parents were saved when I came on the scene. So church has been a part of my life forever, really. So church was a habit, it was a routine, it was a lifestyle in our house. So I was always in church, went to Sunday school, did the usual churchy things. I always said I was going to get baptized at 12, and I did. Got filled at 14, but I really got saved and really took it serious and really started to have a relationship with God at 16, because at that age I was ready to walk, because I couldn't deal with the pretense anymore of trying to please the parents and the church crowd, and knowing deep down in my heart that I'm living a double life, one person on a Sunday and then someone else Monday to Friday, and somebody else on Saturday too. But so I said to God, it's either you save me for real or I'm gone about my business. And it wasn't a very long prayer, it was a very genuine prayer, and can't exactly tell you when that moment happened, but from that moment on my life changed, and that's when I really started to have a relationship with God. Not saying it's been easy all along, but it was what I was committed to, and yeah, here I am many years later. I will not be telling you my age.
I will.
And I'm not 40.
Yes, Joseph.
So my name is Joseph. I'm one of 7 children. I'm number 6. My father was a pastor, so I was raised in the church. My older brothers growing up, crucially for me, were not saved, and so that kind of shaped my view of what I wanted to be. I wanted to really be like my older brothers. So I've had a few defining moments. I was saved at the age of 11 towards the end of year 7, and that really put me on a completely different track for my life. Other defining moments for me were meeting other Christians in college, meeting other Christians at university, doing trips with other churches in the Christian Union to places like Germany, doing camp over there. I did a semester in the US in Charlotte, and then I got to see different kind of churches there, different ways of organising, leading. So I'd like to think that the person I am now is not just based on the church I was raised in, but I've been privileged to be able to see quite a lot of different styles of ministry in church, which has kind of opened my mind a bit to the way church can run. So that's unusual to me.
So there seems to be an issue in Pentecostal churches with young people. I think we could say we're in the Caribbean Pentecostal circle. I don't think it's just limited to the Caribbean Pentecostal circle, but as that's what we're in, we can speak to that the most. But there seems to be a problem with the young adult generation. It seems that when people reach an age where they have an opportunity or an option to not come, they don't come anymore. And it wasn't always like that, because I think in the 90s there was a lot more younger people in church. Maybe even in the early 2000s they were still going in, still maybe getting into their 20s and still being in church. So what is the problem for you, Kay? Because you've been in church, like you say, all your life. What do you think the problem is at the current moment? And why does it exist, do you think? Where does it stem from?
I think that's the answer to that is huge.
Yeah. Brief summary.
But just from what I have seen, I think sometimes the way we do church is a problem for the younger generation. I think perhaps the gaps in the age ranges. In some churches you might have, say the Sunday school kids, say primary school age, and then there's maybe a gap, and then there's the older people, and so the actual other young people to relate to, sometimes there aren't enough young people. Sometimes I think it's down to maybe how the leadership treat the young people, how if they don't feel a part of church. Sometimes growing up you can feel that Sunday school is one church and then there's regular church after that, and once Sunday school is over it's kind of like, well, I might as well not be here. And then again, it's always the age-old thing of once those teenage hormones kick in, like everything changes. You start to become independent, start to figure out who you are, you start to, your eyes are now open to more. And I think sometimes the balance between preparing our young people for the world that we live in and cocooning them, and sometimes I think we get the balance wrong, and so it's almost like we're so restricted and we're in the church world, but as soon as we hit teenagers and our eyes are open, now it's like wow, I've got to leave, I've got to escape, I've got to be a part of this. So I think sometimes maybe we miss the balance of preparation as well as shielding and still trying to keep a part of the church world. And I would say, personally speaking for myself, a lack of age appropriate spirituality. Now what I mean by that is that prayer meetings were often an old people's thing. Bible study was often an old people's thing. I'm not knocking anyone's age, but I found a lot of the time we were missing a trick in the way we taught young people and what we taught them about the basics of prayer and fasting. It seemed like it was something old people did, and it was boring, and I don't want to be a part of that. But if you lose or you miss out on that, the basics of what keeps you alive spiritually, then you're not going to remain. So that's a whole host of things, but yeah.
Leon, what have you observed since you've come into the church?
I think it's a relationship thing. There is a lack of relationship between the older generation, and that nobody knows each other, and you can't know somebody in 2 hours or 3 hours at church. that's not relationship, because if we only spoke to God when we came to church, then what kind of Christians would be we? We're always pumping it into our young people. You can't just be a Sunday morning Christian only, but then when they come to church or they're at youth meetings and stuff like that, we want them to bare their souls and we want them to do this and say that, but you don't know them after church. You've never invited them to your house for tea, or you've never take one of the young boys that don't have a grandma or whatever to the park. You don't know how to relate to them. Likewise, a young person, they've never gone and visit a widow that's at home from Monday to Saturday and said, "Oh mum, I'm just coming to look for you." So if you don't know me, you can't relate to me, you can't talk to me, and you can't reach me. So I think that's one of the, what I've observed anyway, that's one of the biggest thing that I've seen.
Okay, so I've got a two-part question for you, Joseph. What are the problems that you've observed, probably separate to what you've heard, and why have these problems arisen, do you think, in our type churches at this time specifically?
So I think there's a common feature with our kinds of churches, and one of the things is the age of our churches, and that's not a problem, but it presents different challenges. When our churches were in their first generation, they had that community feel. Everything was relevant because everybody knew each other, and when you're setting something up for the first time, that's quite exciting, and one of the things that are drawing some of our young people away are churches in their first generation. And what we haven't conquered is how do you grow up, stay relevant, and stay in touch. Over time, cultures form within churches, and you cannot be friends with everybody. You know, Kay might be my best friend, but it doesn't mean I can't be friendly to Dion. Right? Fast forward that 10 years down the line, I don't necessarily talk to Dion. I'm always with Kay, my children are with Kay, Kay's in my house, I'm in Kay's house. Then a visitor comes in and they've got to choose between Dion camp and Kay camp, and we're just so in our own world that we haven't thought about what people need to feel again when they come into church, because we're so comfortable in it and we've been comfortable in it for so long. So we have to be mindful of what our challenges are as a second and third generation church, and that goes to a lot of our churches, probably started around the 50s, 60s, 70s, right, all around that sort of mark. So there's a cultural issue, there's a transition issue. When our parents came, it was bang on relevant. We're all immigrants, you know, all had the same struggles, all trying to get a property, all trying to get a job, all suffering from racism, and all that kind of conflict actually drives a sort of community and unity. People got married not even because they loved each other, but they know, boy, you know, we might as well, we can get a property, and you know, and they were too ashamed to divorce, you know. So the culture of the time was different. And now we're the children, we've come, we've gone into schools, we've gone to university. The people that we're witnessing to can't relate to all the culture of our church. We can walk in both of them, but they can't. So how do we model our churches so that the people that we're meeting on a daily basis, the second and third generation, can actually come into the same space and be ministered to and not be isolated and not be sort of, you know, okay, what's all that about? These are, and if we don't recognize that this is our challenge, we won't actually try and fix those things. They're fixable, you know. For us to fix these sorts of things, we would need to wipe our church calendars clean and say, right, here are the people we're trying to win. What would church look like if we were trying to win them? Right? I've got people from the corporate world who have got time for me. If they've got time for me, they've got time for God, because I am the church, just like you are the church. If they have time for me but don't have time for my church, then my church is the problem, not the church. You see? So we've made church the space that we go to and not the people we are. And therefore we think people only get saved when they come to church, not on their interaction with me. So we've got to do a lot of what we call reverse engineering and saying, right, if we want that kind of fish, you need a hook that's, you know, and a line that's this long. If you want to catch a whole load of those, you need a net that's this big. If it's a big fish you want, you better go with a harpoon. The church is not really thinking about our churches, who they want to save. We're happy to have Caribbean church, black church, and preaching our own lingos and whatever. We're happy to preach to ourselves, and that's the stuff that we really need to challenge. If we recognize that as a problem, not just that our leaders are irrelevant. No, well, that's a leadership issue. We need young people in leadership. We need young people around the decision-making table. We need every person possible represented in how we're strategizing about how we do church. Sometimes we're planning for church and we don't have jobs, and therefore we're murdering people with the times that we're putting out, because we feel that that's not a problem, but for a family, that's not good. You want people to come to your church from Manchester, and you finish in your church at 10 o'clock. You don't actually want Manchester to come to your church because of how you're setting up your meetings. We need to think about who we want to reach and how we're going to reach them, and just delete what we're doing right now. We know worship works, we know prayer works, we know the word works. How can we rearrange this to actually meet the needs of the people we're trying to win?
So that leads us on to one of the questions we got on Facebook, which is how best to modernize the church to attract or retain young people without losing or diluting spiritual fervor. Dion.
I haven't got a clue. I don't know. But to me, how it worked for me is I came into this church, people befriended me, but I also had a really good friend, and she was very much into her word, and she encouraged me. Her and her husband came and picked me up on Tuesdays because there was prayer meeting. I wanted to learn how to pray, so I was there at prayer meetings. She introduced me to a Bible school, so I started going to Bible school. When it comes onto, I'm really a very old-fashioned person, and I think that, but in my job they have this model about retaining good people, the good people that they have, and growing their business and whatever. So what they do, they go into the different sectors and they pick out what they call champions, and they teach them about the structure of the company, the history of the company, and give them leadership training, etc. They're all about training. So I think one thing that I think is lacking in the church, like for somebody that's cooking or whatever, a mother that's cooking, she's been cooking all her life, but she's never taken a young sister and allowed her to see every step of what she's doing. So when she retires and decides to do what she's doing, there's no one there to fill her space or to change it to make it better. So if you've been used to using a pot, I might have an idea that you can use a rice cooker, but because I don't know if I'm making any sense, but because I've never been
exposed to it,
encouraged that I can even, or to be encouraged to try or whatever, you don't know my opinion, you don't think that I have anything of value to say or to input but I think a lot of it is gonna stem from retraining ourselves. The things change all the time, the way the world works, and I think that it's no more about just say, this is the Bible, read it, or come and sit down in Sunday school, it's about what your pastor say, or whatever. We've got to try and encourage people to really be self-sufficient in God, because we're not around them 24/7, and if they don't know how to, they can't reach anybody else. I don't even know if that's relevant to the question that you asked. But so
you maybe stayed on the how do we retain once they're in, how do we keep them? So how do we attract these young people without losing spiritual fervour. Now, I could take that deeper and say, people see our type of church and say, oh, these are old school churches or old school holiness churches. What is going to make our churches more attractive to these people? Do we have to change some of the things that we do? Change the way we look? Do we need gimmicks? Should we, you know, turn off the lights and have concerts? Like, what are we not doing?
Should we? I believe if we're going to stay relevant for the time we live in, we have to change. I think an issue we have is that we don't evaluate our systems, our practices. You know, we do it because it's what we've always done. Whether it works or not is besides the issue. And then when we're hemorrhaging people, at times it appears as if we want to blame the people. But all right, there may be fault in that part, but we have to look at us. So I think we have to start from the ground up. We need to evaluate what we are doing, what's not working, what is working, and then, as Joseph said earlier, who do we want to reach? Now, if we're talking about retaining young people in our, for want of a better word, more traditional type Pentecostal churches, principles will never change. Methods will. Points and standards of holiness. Now, this is the thing. I think teaching is so crucial and so key. A lot of the time when you hear certain words, and as I would say the buzzwords of church, it immediately conjures up an impression and an image in your mind. As soon as you say holiness, I can guarantee you that a lot of people are thinking old fuddy-duddy, very way back when, archaic. But if you're going to entice people, because soul winning is really about enticing people, drawing them in, making them see that what you have or what we have is what you really need. This is a better way. But how we deliver our better way message is so key. So I think the way we teach is going to have to be different, interactive. It's going to have to be something engaging. We're going to have to reach people where they're at. Do we need gimmicks? Now, I don't know if I'd use the word gimmicks as such, but we need something that is going to make a statement. Young people these days, we're very into, you know, social media and all sorts of things. We have to be on the cutting edge of all the technology that's available to us, and provide things that people want. The bottom line is, if someone's not coming to church, it's because they're not interested. There's something there that they're not feeling that they need or want. Church has to be delivering something you need. And a lot of the time, I think sometimes we miss it because we don't treat people holistically. We're good at the spiritual, and especially from our church background, ain't nobody can preach revelation like some of us, right? We know it back to front. We good on the word, right? But once the spiritual aspect is done and sorted, what about the rest of the person? How do you live Monday to Friday? You know, can your kid do their homework tonight? You know, we've got an abundance of different professionals and people that if we were placing them in the right places. So my point is that church, we have to be holistic in treating individuals. We cannot always keep it. Church is a spiritual place, and it's about the spirit and saving souls, etc. But we cannot exclude that we are human too. We have to have a good balance of times of fellowship, times of retreat, times of fun. I mean, we're young, right? We're talking about retaining young people. What things do young people like to do? You know what I mean? I mean, we can't have prayer meetings 24/7. Yes, we need to pray, but there has to be some balance and knowing who you're working with. And I'll keep it right there, otherwise I'll go on.
I don't have a problem with the whole holistic approach, all of that jazz. I don't have a problem with fellowshipping and all of that stuff. But the thing is, a lot of our young people at the moment, they're just like, they're all about themselves, all of this holistic stuff as well. It's like, okay, we're gonna fix you. It always bring them back to themselves. Okay, what about you? What about you? It's not about us. our salvation is, we're not the point. And if we keep pandering, the thing is, I have a son, okay, and you can't always give children what they want, because if he asked me, if he had a choice, he would probably eat candy 24/7 from the time he was born. But as a parent, would I be responsible in giving him that candy 24/7? I'd be classed as a bad mother. I'd be, it'll be neglectful. He needs more than that to grow and to be healthy and whatever. And sometimes we have to give our young people what they need, not just what they want. They party a lot. We're always on about fellowshipping. I'm not saying to kill them with the Bible, but if we're presenting it like, well, prayer meeting is boring or whatever, how are they gonna grow? How are they gonna learn to speak to God? Which is the point of church, is to help us to get into heaven. That's the first priority and responsibility of the church. Everything else, unfortunately, secondary. If I go to church and nobody ever says hello to me, that's secondary. If I go there and nobody ever gave me a skirt or $1 when I'm penniless, that's secondary.
But I would say with that said,
No, go on.
But I would say with that said, balance is key. Like I said, church is the place where we come to feed the soul, to enter a relationship with Christ and all of that. But if we're talking about keeping and attracting young people, we have to know what bait to use. Now, the bottom line is, as you said, is to get them to heaven, but teaching and how we give them the information of the spiritual walk with Christ, because no matter what, there's nothing that's going to fix you like Jesus. Nothing like prayer and fasting can fix anything and everything. But once we've taught them that, but it's how do we teach them? How do we present this? But I said with that comes the balance of recognizing where they are, recognizing that they're young, recognizing the world that they live in, and a balance of preparing them to take over from us and to go forward. But we have to recognize where we're at, because we cannot sit here and lie and say we ain't losing them. We are.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question. Pastor, just say pastor now because it's a question I'm going to ask. Do we need to entertain people into the kingdom? Is there a precedent for that in the Bible, or can entertainment be a good bait? Will people stay if we attract them with something maybe left the field, and then knock them over the head with the Bible after that? How do we do it? Because they're not saying anything mutually exclusive. They're both ultimately saying there needs to be a balance. But what is going to turn the eye of the person who loves partying, who loves drinking, who loves doing whatever is in the world, who loves the world's music and stuff like that? What is actually going to turn their eye?
So I don't think it's entertainment, and I think the question of how we attract them, in the normal world, when you want to attract somebody, you have to appeal to them in some way. The problem we have, and the problem which churches are responding to in the wrong way, is that you cannot appeal to the flesh to be spiritual. You cannot appeal to flesh to be godly. It doesn't want to be. It doesn't want to be submitted. It doesn't want to be subjected. It doesn't want to be restricted. It wants to be able to have its pleasure. So how can you bait flesh? Jesus, in his mission, as it was outlined in Isaiah 61, gave us the key. He says, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because he's anointed me to preach the good news to the meek or the poor. And what he sent me to bind up the proud of heart, the broken-hearted. Okay, he sent me to set the captives and the prisoners free, to set at liberty those who are bound, to destroy every yoke. So Jesus' approach was to meet people not at the point of their interest, but at the point of their need. You work with people for years who don't respond too well to you and think you're crazy, But when their nearby relative gets sick, they come to you for prayer, a point of their need. Right? And so what we need to be praying for is the opportunity to meet people at the point that we can catch them, which is the point of their need. Everybody has a need. Right? The woman at the well, you know, other people may have said she didn't have no need because she could get man when she wanted man. She was fine. And in this day and age, that's a satisfied woman. Because when she want a man, she can get him. She don't need no commitment. That's a mentality that's out there today. But Jesus, when he went to that, was able to, because he could discern her life, he was able to get to her need. And he was able to use the water in that place to say, boy, you're thirsty. They use that term today, right? You're thirsty. But I can quench that thirst. You see? So if you can't get to a person's problem, you can't get them to the point where they can actually repent. Because if you're bringing someone to church and the hook is not something that is a point of their need, then they're coming for entertainment. And when they come back next week and you don't entertain them, they're like, what are you bringing me here for? Now you want me to be holy? You watch these mega churches out there. I've seen all of these top preachers. Every now and then the Lord just allows me to tune in to the Sunday where they start rebuking their congregation for being materialistic. Well, that's how you got them in. You preach them in about money, better life, and all this, and now you want them to be holy. They don't got the appetite for it. That's not how they were won. So it's not what they want. It's finding what they need. And will everybody be saved? No. But does everybody have to hear? Yes. They do. And with that, we use technology. We use all the modern ways of interacting and reaching people, to find them at the point of their need. Not trying to make them like your pastor. Give a testimony about healing. Put that out there on the internet. Talk about where you came from in your life. That somebody who's at the same place where you were can see, wow, if that person can move from there to there, and she's giving the glory to God, I need to know the God that she's talking about.
Okay, so before we move on to another angle, do you have anything to add or any different points to add to this finally on how we attract and retain?
Well, I want to add something else to it, right?
Okay.
Which is that one of the challenges our children and young people have is that they can find a church that will bait their flesh. Right? There's a church out there that will give them what they want, which will make your church look like it ain't doing what it should be doing. And their flesh loves it. But I've met people down through the years who've gone to a lot of these big churches, and I'll tell you this, the people who actually get into fellowship with God don't stay in those churches. They end up leaving because they say, this doesn't work for me now because I'm somewhere else. And so I'm not knocking these churches because what they do is that they're great nets. Right? They have a way of a form of catching, and if the gospel is preached and someone actually receives it in the midst of that, they actually can be changed. If someone follows the word and gets into a relationship with God, they can actually get themselves to a place of actually being saved. And not everybody in a big church is a sinner or a bad person. Sometimes God has people in places that we maybe wouldn't visit to actually help people to come into a relationship with Christ. So I'm not just trying to write all the churches off, but we need to be careful that the churches that are out there, which are set to appeal to the flesh of our children, pull them out at their most vulnerable point. Just when they get fed up with the way your church goes, the novelty of something new often pulls people away. But my thing is the test of time. Those churches are in their first generation. How are they going to deal with their second and third generation? They're going to have the same issues that we're having today, but they're just not there yet.
Okay, Dion, anything to add to that? Or to take away? Any retorts, disagreements? Go on, Dion. I'll hold back now.
I don't know. I'm really, I found this scripture in Titus, and it says that the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith, in charity, patience. This is the bit that I like, verse 3, when it said the aged women likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given into much wine, teachers of good things. And it goes on, Paul was talking to Titus, and it goes on to say what the older women should teach the younger women. This wasn't scriptural from God, but it was doctrine, like a how would you say, a model of how the church is supposed to be set up and how it grows. That's how you grow your house. That's how your household evolve. You have to be, you know, your mom has to teach you something for you to learn it. You know, I always tell my son that, you know, not because I'm older, but I'm actually taller than you, because I can see further, you know. So that's why I'm here to advise you, not because I know everything that you're gonna experience or whatever, but because my vision is wider. You know, I can see further down the road. I can see a pitfall and I can see a pothole, because I'm standing taller than you, and because you're my son, and because I love you, I'm gonna advise you of the pitfall. It's not that I always want to tell you off or tell you, and I find that sometimes our young people, we haven't taught them how to take positive criticism. It's almost like if somebody says no, they don't like you or they're wicked, but that's not true. That's a lie from the pit of hell, because the Bible says, whom the Lord loveth, he chastens. And the Bible also said it's a wicked father that don't chastise or discipline his child. So if we're just telling them yes, it's okay, then that means we don't actually love them. And if they don't know how to, you know, accept somebody saying, well, don't do that, honey, it's not good for you, and think, well, that person really, they're gonna always listen to those people. Oh, come follow me, you're so good, you're so nice, you're doing everything right, and follow them right down to hell.
So you're saying there's like a over encouragement, hyper grace movement that's just telling children or young people, it's all good, you're all fine, and there's no balance of actually you need to do this.
Yeah, you've got to be truthful to people.
Nothing you can do that can stop God from loving you.
Yeah.
And some said he's angry with the wicked every day.
And then you end up in hell and you think, what did I do wrong? I thought you loved me.
I think, like I said before, balance. We've got some really weird doctrines going on in modern day Christendom, but I believe, I've always said, because I teach in church, that you can never assume that people know if you haven't taught it. So if I didn't teach it, I cannot say you know. And so I believe the way we give information out is key. Don't assume they know, and how you teach, what you teach, and the relevance to what you're teaching is key. Because especially in a world where we've got so much access to information, we are, well, not say we, but me, but our generations coming up are very thirsty for knowledge. You know, just ask Uncle Google and bam, instant knowledge. And so if we are not answering their questions and giving them the right answers, because one thing I know, and it's tested in the Word of God, truth will prevail.
Yes.
When you tell people the truth, as much as we like to think, oh, people don't want to be saved these days, and people just go, people want truth.
Yeah.
And when you have quality, truthful teaching, people will stay, they will be drawn to it, because you're the one voice out of everybody else's who's making sense. So when we teach our young people the truth, and you know, sometimes, oh, they're too young. In my personal opinion, you can disagree. If they're old enough to genuinely ask, they're old enough to know. And if you haven't got the information, go find it. Don't leave the question hanging, because there's someone who is all too willing out there to fill in the gaps. And sometimes, as growing up as a young person in church, there was always those questions that never got answered. And we can't afford to live like that in this day and age, and then wonder why at a certain age they walk off and fall into the same pitfalls we've been talking about in riddles and parables. we can't afford that now.
Is there one more thing? And that's that, and thank you. I think we can't afford to just preach as well, and just say to our communities, our doors are open on these days. Please come and see us. We have to actually step over the boundaries of our churches to reach our communities. And there's a saying, which is, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I think a lot of our churches have got locked up in doing a lot of internal things. We've not taken a genuine interest in our communities. And when I say not a genuine interest, it takes a sacrifice for you to get under the skin of what's going on in your local area. There are local community meetings that are happening and our pastors aren't there. They're having Bible study and they're teaching the flock, and they can't hear what the neighbourhood is talking about. They don't know that they're scared of what's going on the streets here and there. They don't know what the local people are actually feeling, and therefore they don't become a voice for the local people. Nobody looks to them for an answer. They just become someone in the church. And when you look at, and I believe in this greatly, how activism has been mixed with the church in the years where it's been very visible. Martin Luther King, for instance, and I'm not trying to verify his life, but if we can't feel the community and have a burden for what's going on around us, then we actually take ourselves out of the conversation and we make ourselves irrelevant by just being a pulpiteer. Leaders have to go beyond the pulpit and reach their communities in person.
Okay, so we've dealt with how to attract and retain. Now I want to move into a question we got on Facebook.
Oh,
Yes.
wait, can I just say something? It just came to me. Talking about attracting and retaining on the back of what Joseph said. We're dealing with young people especially. Young people are full of energy because they're young, right? Purpose is key. Church has to be a place where everybody has a purpose. If it's as simple as putting out the Bibles on the benches, taking up the cushions after, but a purpose, a job. And sometimes I find because our young people are not kept active, busy, have responsibilities, have duties to perform, then they become idle, bored, lifeless, and they just think, what's the point? So off the back of that, I would say, ministry shouldn't just be kept for those of a certain age. If you're going out to stand on the street corner and preach, take 2 of the young people with you. In scripture we have Paul and Timothy, and you know what I mean, he took him everywhere, he trained, and this is I think what Dion was talking about, mentoring them, teaching them. You can't leave them at home and then expect them that when you done and gone, they're going to come and just flow. And take them with you, make them a part of it, make them feel that church is for them, and it's not just, oh, when I get to their age then I can do kind of thing.
So why is there a discipleship issue, do you think? And how do we then solve that? You said just taking them, but there must be, everybody can't be taken. So how do you actually solve that for the whole church? Not just for the one who might be the pastor or the prophet or the musician, but how do we solve this for the whole church? How does everyone get mentored and discipled?
I would say start small. Things like buddy systems, cell groups. As soon as a new convert comes in, link them with somebody. Don't leave them on their own. I don't believe church should be a place where nobody knows your number, and you haven't spoken to someone Sunday from the next Sunday. Link people with other people. We used to do things in our youth groups where, a young person was linked with an older, more mature young person, and it was a responsibility that you call them every week, check in with them. Prayer meetings, things like that, house fellowships, just as what Dion was saying earlier about relationship, building relationships, know who is in the house, and it starts from there. And like you said, you can't take everyone everywhere, but that's when you start to see people's giftings, people's abilities, so that you can say, right, you go and work in that department, I'm going to link you up with sister so-and-so, brother so-and-so, and so on and so on. I think it starts from, sometimes I think we overthink it and think we need some big grand scheme, but
that's a culture shift that's required for that to be maintained and embedded in that church. It's changing the way you think about why you're coming to church and how you're managing people that come in the door. And I think trialing that is easier than it is to transform the church. For instance, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they have a program where everybody knows within a few months, I'm going to have to start knocking doors. We don't have such rigidity, and we're not forcing people to become part of what we're doing, and therefore it's easier for them to fall off. So just backing up what Kay's saying, but that has to become a culture, and that's a leadership issue then, and it has to come from the top right the way down. And sometimes, like in our generation, what flows from the top is actually sometimes a result of how what's in the middle flows up and then comes down. So our elders are not going to have all the ideas, and I think we need to be bold enough when we're seeing stuff, when we're seeing gifts in people that maybe they haven't all spotted. We are the eyes and ears of our ministry, and we have to say, hey, look, why can't we do this? Let's try this. You know, we cannot. When I get to, if God willing, I get to 80, I'm going to become irrelevant to the lower generations, and I need to be cognizant that I need to start listening to the people beneath me so that what flows down is relevant. So it's a two-way street. Leaders need to really listen to those in the middle, and the middle need to be bold enough to speak up to the power to say, hey, why don't we roll out certain programs like this and transform the culture?
Final idea?
No, I just want to ask a question, Pastor Joseph. What advice would you give to a pastor then who is very afraid of this process, of this change? Because sometimes I think the way that people approach their pastor and the way they speak to them, sometimes it's very rude, or they feel like they own them, like all your time, all your everything belongs to me. You know, how then can he rifle through that sea of, you know, just come to me with your ideas?
So I think leaders have to lead, and you know, my first response in my head was, you know, stand up or go home, but I'm gonna say that. Right? It's an answer I haven't given because maybe it might come out later, but the way we develop men is really important, and you need a leader who's a leader who can be a leader of men. People need to be able to look at that man and think, that's a man I would like to follow. If he's getting so much ideas that he doesn't know what to do, then he needs to take them to the closet. First of all, I think the leader should have a very good idea about what's needed. And when he hears things coming out of the congregation, I think something in his heart should say, love that. That's in line with what I want. I like the outcome of what you're saying. I didn't have your idea, but I can see how your idea delivers the outcome that's in my spirit. He's got to be outcome driven. He's got to have a clear vision of what he's trying to achieve. In our area of Harlesden, Stonebridge, you know, these areas, we don't have some of the people that are in other churches. And the Lord told me once, you have to understand the journey that you need to take your congregation on. You know, if I'm in a rich community, my church might not need the teaching on finance. They might actually get it. I've been to a church where the average degree was a master's in Florida, because they're in a university town and government center in Tallahassee. Okay, there's some things that you don't need to drive home. In our area, we might need to start teaching these guys how to manage their money, how to build their finance. The leader must understand what journey he needs to take his people on. Right? So having lots of ideas, he should be able to spot an idea that's not relevant, because it's not going to deliver the outcome that God put in his spirit for those people. Yeah, so the leaders have to lead. And
I would say, to second that, you asked about how do you deal with a leader who may be afraid of that change and that going forward. I think number one, respect is due. You may not agree with them, you might not like their leadership style, that's irrelevant. They're the leader, and so anything that you're going to come to a leader with, you come with it with respect and take them through it. Remember who you're dealing with. They're a person at the end of the day. Sometimes it may mean that you have to bake a cake and take a buckle of slur. I said slur, right?
Church one.
Church one, right? And sit them down. And sometimes,
I'd be suspicious of that.
well, no, I'm not saying you're bribing them now, but what I'm saying is take them on a journey and explain things, because sometimes how you approach a person and what they feel you are coming about. If they just feel like you're just coming to change me and tell me I'm wrong and what I've been doing is terrible all these years, then that's not a good way to go. Take them on it. Try and sell the vision. Help them to see it from different angles. Know who you're dealing with. Did I say it's going to work every time? Absolutely not. Best thing to do, pray before you go ahead.
That was
God
my
got to
next
inspire you.
I was going to say, before you come out with that, prayer is one thing we can do, but there are books on managing your managers, managing sideways, you know, and upwards. Like some of these things, they might sound really carnal, but actually the principles of how to approach people, when to approach people. Sometimes when you approach your pastor in the midst of other people, sometimes it's the wrong time to do it. Sometimes it feels more intimidating. I'm the pastor. That's if I see you coming with a gift, my radar goes up. So I know you said I'm thinking, don't take gifts, but those books are good because it's a lot more about personality, right? And understanding that sometimes it's a personality type issue. I'm being hard on any leader who gets nervous around their people, but I'm thinking, they have to be courageous enough to stand by at the same time. People are in influential positions. Like say in our churches, I think we're all in positions where we can actually flow up ideas that can come back down and help the body. We need to know how to communicate with our leaders.
So what if a young person who has no, place in the ministry, not ordained, comes with an idea and they know that God has given them this idea, yet they get rejected? What should that young person do?
Keep going.
Now it's easy to say,
No.
but you think about it, you've prayed about it,
Yeah.
you've got the witness, you're excited, you bring it to your pastor, you're humble, you're not rude, and he's just like, who are you?
I think that person can only feel better about that situation years down the line. It's not going to feel good in that moment, right? And sometimes we get tested in that way, because then he could be being tested on, do you really know the voice of God? And how do you respond? He might think a year down the line, I should have never let up on this because I know God told me. So we all get trained, just like Samuel did, in knowing when God is actually speaking to you. So sometimes that's a journey for him. You can't say that if God gave him an idea, that God knew that it wasn't going to happen. Of course God knew it wasn't going to happen, but God gave him the idea for a reason. So we've got to see God in everything. Sometimes even in our leaders' rejection and delay over thing, there's a lesson and there's some learning in there. We just, as is the case, that we have to maintain the respect of our leadership. And my father-in-law said one thing to me. He says, you don't have to be a politician, but you have to understand politics. And sometimes it's just about how you deliver your idea when you come back with it. I'm going to expose my church and I'm going to say that I know that if I bring an idea that's kind of edgy, controversial / if I bring it this year, it will come back as someone else's idea in 3 years and be accepted. Alright, so I know I've got about a 3-year wait to bring in a real major change, but I've got to bring that idea every year, push it every year, get knocked back to year or two, and then see it come to fruition in another. Sometimes that's just how things change in organizations, and that's unfortunate, but we have to live with that.
Patience.
Yeah.
If you know God gave it to you, you wait with it with patience, because you can't push it forward on your own accord. You can't usurp authority and just start something. So you therefore, start something. So you therefore take your time and you wait.
So don't go and start your own church.
Definitely not.
But God told you.
Oh, God told you, but He may not have given you a date, and it may be a case that as it has to filter through, and some things. And you know what? God is a God of order, and everything He does, His timing is perfect. So although you may feel that I wanted this to happen right now, but when it happens, it's the perfect time for it.
You have anything to add?
No.
Right, so I think we can wrap up on this question because we've covered quite a lot today. So from our Facebook page, someone says, how can our young people maintain purity during their Christian walk? What does that look like in real time? And they want you to take the perspective of the reality for those who have been in a relationship prior to being saved and those who have never been in one. So those who probably grew up in church, never really went outside, how do they maintain purity? And how do those who have been outside and maybe had a child and come in, how did they then, maintain purity after having been in the world and, experience the pleasures of the flesh, so to speak?
Wow. Okay. It's not easy. you have to be totally committed and be deadly honest. For me, I think my first year of church, that didn't bother me. I was like, oh my God, I just love Jesus. I want Jesus. No, I was proper on it. 6 years, I was like, yeah, I'm loving it and everything like that. And like, I think 6 year mark, and I was speaking to my ex, and we're still friends. We have a son, we have to raise him together, but everything was nice, you know. And then I found out that he was seeing someone else, and I'm like, oh my God, my world crumbled. Because I'm not gonna lie, I was praying like, oh Lord, just save him, you know, so we can be Christian. But one day I was in my room praying for him, and I'm not saying God saved, but I knew I was having a conversation with some voice, I don't know. All I heard was stop lying. I'm like, but I'm not lying though. I know. And the voice said, stop lying. I'm like, but I'm not lying. It's like, you're not praying for him, you're praying for him. And I'm like, this was like, I'm like, but Lord, I was by myself having this big long conversation. I'm like, but I just want you to, like, this is God. He knows you the inside out. And I did not know that I still had feelings for this man. I'm like, I didn't realize. And when it hit me like a ton of bricks, I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I'm a Christian now. He's not a Christian. He's not in church. It's like a whole kettle of fish or whatever, just it was mental. And I was like, okay, well, maybe if I talk to him. So we talked like, okay, so what's gonna happen now? Well, if you want to get back to, and I'm like, but I can't get back together with you, like you're not in church. And what happened, he got baptized. I was like, yes,
Time now.
yeah. I'm not even gonna lie, I was proper excited, because I'm thinking, yeah, God is saving him for me. And one day I went to church, and I was praying still, even though I know God is saying no, but I'm praying because, like, well, this is a family, Lord, you know, you can't break up a family. Yeah.
Trying to manipulate God.
I'm just saying. He said to ask, innit? Anyway, we went to church, and Sister Gordon, if you ever watch this, I just wanted you to know you brought my world, okay? You brought my world. She's like, Sister Dion, I had a dream. Now, I would not talk to this lady about my life. I had a dream about you last night. And I'm like, yes. She goes, you was in church and they was announcing your engagement. I was like, yes. She's like, and everybody was so happy for you, but I was not.
I did.
She goes, the Lord said to tell you, you're a new creation.
Shame.
Wow. I went home and I just put on I smiled to her, and I'm okay, thank you. Because in my mind, I knew exactly what she was saying. I went home, and I don't think I ever cried like that before. Because it was me now realizing that God is saying, no, thank you, done, finish, goodbye, lock up shop, never again. And now I'm thinking, well, what do I do with all of this affection and this love that I have for this man? You know, we had a child together. What do I do? So whoever asked this question, whenever I felt the need or the urge or whatever, I had a friend that I phoned her. I'm like, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm going to do. And she would pray for me. I never lied to her about what I was feeling or what was happening. This one night I was at home, and he was like, okay, I'm going to come round and we can talk. it was like, how much o'clock at night? Who's gonna talk? And I'm like, okay, we just talk. Lie. And I think it was about 2 minutes or so before he came. I said, Lord, if he comes tonight, this is what I'm going to do. I'm sorry, but I'm going to sleep with him. So if you don't want me to sleep with him, do not make him come here. That was it, 2 minutes. And my phone rang and he's like, oh, my car's not starting, I can't come.
Wow. Can I just say, that might always work.
No, seriously, it does not always work. My friend phoned me the next morning about 6 o'clock. She goes, what happened to you last night? She goes, at such and such a time, I was praying for you because something was happening. She goes, you need to get up now and you need to go to church, to prayer meeting. But it doesn't always work. There were times when, I'm not even gonna lie to you, whoever asked you the question, I didn't make it. Okay, I had some slip-ups, and the first time I did that, I was like, okay, I'm not going back to church ever again, because everybody's gonna see, everybody's gonna know what I did. I can't. And not only that, I wanted to just hide from God because I felt so ashamed and dirty. I couldn't cope with it.
Yeah.
Like, I thought I was gonna go crazy. And I prayed, but it didn't feel any better. And then I was reading my Bible and there was a scripture that says, confess your faults one to another. I found a sister in the church that I could trust, that I could, well, not I found her, she found me. She dropped me home from church and she wouldn't leave. She really wouldn't leave my house. And I just blurted everything out. And she didn't condone it. She didn't embarrass me. She didn't shame me up. She held me accountable and she prayed with me and just set up ways. And well, if you're feeling like this, phone me. If blah blah blah, phone me. Phone me. So I had nowhere to just cover and hide and escape. But you've got to take responsibility.
Honesty. And
you've got to be honest, and you've got to, it's not about people knowing or people seeing. God sees, God knows, him first. And that's what drives you, even when you fall, that his love is able to cover you.
So an accountability partner is actually a biblical principle.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, so that's the way you coped. You had an accountability partner. Okay, thank you very much for being so open. Okay.
How to maintain purity. Okay, my perspective, as I said earlier, is being born and raised in church. Growing up in church as a young person, it was almost like an unwritten rule. It was just one of those things you knew, like you don't talk to a boy, don't sit next to a boy, don't smile at a boy, don't shake hands with them. Exaggerating, but you get the point. Stay away, and that you kind of grow up with that mentality in church that stay away from the opposite sex, etc. I have my own issues with that, but that's irrelevant at the minute.
Another
show. But to me, the whole thing of trying to remain pure, I go back to what I've been harping on about teaching. What frustrated me the most with church is that it was hard to find anybody who was honest, who was transparent, and who would just answer a question. Like, we go to school and by a certain age they're teaching you sex education, and you come to church and we pretend like sex don't exist, but people still having babies, and I'm like, why are we doing this? Because it's like two parallel worlds. And then especially when you start getting older, feelings are changing, hormones are and you're growing up, attraction is starting, and it's almost like you don't know what to do with these feelings, and sometimes you feel you're condemning your own self for having feelings that are quite natural. And so I would say we have to start teaching and being honest about the changes that take place, what happens, how you're going to feel, and having somebody you can talk to. I give God thanks for the the two people that were in my teenage years who were the go-to person, who would give you a straight answer on a question, wouldn't make you feel any way for asking a question, and wouldn't go expose you either. You know, next thing you talk to them, and before you know it, before service finish, it's the message for the day. You know, that didn't happen, thank you Jesus. But I would say in maintaining purity, you have to be honest and common sense. Like, there are certain things I had to do, not because I wanted to do, but because I know me. And I know if I like you, I'm not going to come to your yard past a certain time, because you know what? My dad always says, and he's Jamaican, I'm going to say it in the patois and I'll explain it. He said, don't rub butter in a puss mouth. Right? What that simply means, in my own words, is don't tempt the devil to tempt you.
Yeah.
Know your weaknesses, know where you're at, and know you have to be realistic with where you're at and put your own boundaries in place. There's certain responsibility that only you can take. You have to put the boundaries in yourself. Yes, it's good to have somebody that you can, as the Dion said, the mentee, someone to be hold you accountable. But sometimes I think we just run headlong into things, and it's almost like, do you really need to know the outcome of this? You really do need know the outcome to this. I think knowing who you are and where you're at, and keep talking to somebody and keep praying, because I got to a stage in my life where I'm like, you know what, God, I don't like these feelings because they keep getting me into trouble, and you're going to have to deal with them. And God is faithful and God is just. He knows how much you can bear and how much you can manage. And there are certain times people talk about, oh, have a cold shower and all of that. I ain't advocating the cold shower, but if it works for you, it works for you, right? Know you, know where you're at, and don't pretend. And sometimes we feel we put on such a facade of being holy. You're not the poster child for virginity, right? Let's be real. Okay, I was just...
No, finish.
I'll stop right there.
That's when it'll be fun. Go on, finish off.
So yeah, just be real with yourself. And I think it's always good to have a group of peers who love God. That was one thing that helped me, is that there weren't necessarily very many within the church group who as we would commonly say, were on it.
Yes.
But there was always the one or two that you could link with, and just having that fellowship and something to change the subject, because sometimes I find we talk about this thing so much that it becomes a thing, and change the subject and go get a life, travel, have hobbies, do something.
Miserable.
Don't meditate on it. You know what I mean? You're in your yard playing love songs from morning to night. I wonder why you can't control your feelings.
Exactly.
Help yourself.
You can't be playing Jodeci and expecting to do it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Those songs are made to
On the back of all that, it was like, also you have to remember your body. Women at certain times of the month or whatever, certain
Talk to me.
your hormones and the chemicals in your body changes, and it produces certain feelings. It's natural. There's nothing wrong with you. So some of the things that you can do, exercise a lot. I love walking. Walking and exercising, it produces chemical in your body called endorphins, makes you happy. Don't watch too much romantic comedies. I just do news, or I put on a Bible study program that I've been following and stuff like that. Some other things you can do, keep yourself busy, and also there's certain foods that you can eat as well, to just keep your energy levels up, keep healthy. If you like juicing, juice carrots and apples and all that kind of good stuff. And what Kay was saying, don't talk about it too much, because it's just one of those things. It happens to you. We're natural, we're human beings. God created it. It's a beautiful thing, but in confines of marriage and all that jazz.
So there's a lot of practical solutions. It's not all prayer and fasting.
No.
Sometimes it's just
you
take yourself out of harm's way.
Yeah, you've got to be real. You've got to be real. You're gonna feel like how you're gonna. I don't know what happens to boys or whatever it is, but you know, something that I was reading or whatever, like men are very visual, you know, and it doesn't take nothing. So boys, if you know summertime's coming up, you know, don't be out on the street roaming in halls and highs. Yeah, just don't do it. You know, find something else to do. Occupy your time. You know, go visit somebody that's not gonna send your go send your brain.
Go grandmas. Go grandma. Help with the chores.
So yes, Joseph, you can finish this up for us.
You know, I think those answers were just spot on. I think you gave the real-time response that was required. I'll just add just another side of the coin of what you're talking about when you start touching on emotions, hormones, testosterone. And you said you're not sure about the boys. Someone talk a little bit about that before we wrap up. I read some research. The research was done in a strip club. And what they did is they wanted to see how much tips the women would get when they were ovulating versus when they were on their period. And research showed that when the woman was ovulating, she was getting more tips. The same woman got less tips when she wasn't ovulating, was on the period. So the reason why this is the flip side is because your body's telling you as a woman, time to make a baby. Time to make a baby. But what's also happening is the same thing that happens in the animal kingdom. In the animal kingdom, it's a pheromone that goes out, and the men know she's ready. Men can pick up on your ovulation, and it's all happening within the back of their mind. They're not even aware of it. It's like an animal instinct. So in the school playground, the way it plays itself out is that when the girl is ovulating on that day, the boy wants to hit her. Yeah. He wants to trouble her, he wants to knee her, he wants to, start flirting. So she begins to get the attention. So you knowing that, you can actually learn how to position yourself away from that kind of situation, not put yourself around boys. Boys are not going to know. They're not consciously aware that this is what's going on in you. All of a sudden today you look prettier, you look more attractive, you feel like someone they want to talk to, someone they want to trouble. And that's just the science of it all. And I encourage young men, like you said, to do exercise, because the testosterone needs to go somewhere. Like, you get that squash racket, that tennis racket, punching bag, weights or whatever. I encourage any single man, especially if you've had a relationship before, use the gym. Take up that membership. I'll waste my money on the gym. You need to go. Run, do something with your time. But you need to give your body physically an outlet for that testosterone. I think everything you've said about accountability, I couldn't give the answer. That is perfect. That testimony, I believe a lot of people will be helped by that. And I thank you for your honesty and transparency with us. I'm done.
I was just going to say one more thing. I think, again, it goes back to a teaching thing, but I think we need to understand how the opposite sex operates and how they work, and understand when I'm visual, when I'm emotional, etc., etc. Sometimes we fall into traps that aren't necessary because we just didn't get it. Especially in certain church cultures, it's quite funny. They try to keep you away for as long as possible from each other, and by the time you hit 21, they want you to be married off again. It's like, wait a minute, how's that meant to happen? Like, okay, so I think we need to understand how the opposite sex works and be aware of that. There's, no excuse for ignorance, but there's more to life than how you feel. I think sometimes you just have to be realistic, and I got to a place where I just had to learn to override my feelings and be like, okay, it's a feeling, it will pass, I'm going to do this instead. Make your life bigger than that.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. Very interesting discussion. And everybody, make sure that you like the video, subscribe, and leave comments as well. We'd love to hear from you. We're actually going to be in their church, Beulah, in Luton, the Luton branch, on the 10th of February. Joel Andrew and I will be there delivering a session for the young men, so make sure you're there.
2018.
28. Yeah, everybody knows that.
You just never
That's
know.
true. Oh yeah, sorry, that's true. I didn't even think about the future. But yeah, so we're going to be there, so make sure you come and see us there, young men. We're going to actually be dealing with the issue of lust, so it will be very interesting for you. And we'll be talking about coping mechanisms as well and how you actually can be delivered from certain things. So make sure you come and see us on the 10th of February in Luton. You can find out more about us on www.rfyam.com or our YouTube channel or our Instagram at rf_yam. So thanks again, thanks for watching, and goodbye. Stay close to Christ.